Well, good afternoon. I'm Ray Johnson. I am the COO of Bobby Dodd Institute, BDI, and want to thank you for joining us for Full Circle Inclusion and Diversity. What is it? I'm joined today by Roger Brathwaite of Accenture. He is the ServiceNow CIO Quality Lead. Todd Hermon, one of my colleagues at BDI, our VP of Development and Community Relations. And then Jerry Sutton, hopefully, will be joining us. He's our Director of Learning and Organizational Development. So we're grateful that you're here today to join us for this discussion about inclusion and diversity with an extension of really what that means. And before I begin, just a little bit of background on the team. Todd has joined BDI in 2018 as our head of development, but prior to that, really led national development efforts for the March of Dimes and the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And then most recently was head of development for TechBridge. Jerry Sutton, our head of learning and organizational development, is a combat veteran who served for 23 years with the U.S. Air Force and now leads all of our learning and development efforts, specifically in the technology space. So Jerry's actually working with TAG-Ed on a leadership development program, and then also is leading our implementation of training within the QA and user acceptance certification world, as well as IT technician and cybersecurity training. And as us as well, leading efforts around how do we integrate AI with our learning management systems to help those that we serve. And then we're joined by Roger Brathwaite of Accenture. We appreciate his time. Roger leads as a quality lead for Accenture and the ServiceNow, which supports the Google Cloud Platform and also Azure. More importantly, as we talk about inclusion and diversity, Roger is a survivor of two strokes. One that occurred in 2014 when he was 44 years old, and then a second in 2018. But through that and through the challenges, he was committed and focused on, one, not only his four sons, but also getting back to work and really building his career in IT. He's a native of the U.S. Virgin Islands, father of four, as I had said, also a graduate of Norfolk State mechanical engineering, and then also an MBA from the University of Georgia. He also leads Accenture's Disability Employee Resource Group and has founded an organization to support those that have survived strokes called the Young and the Restless of Atlanta. So we want to welcome Roger as well to this discussion. And now, as we say, full circle inclusion and diversity, what is it? Well, as you've heard throughout the day about inclusion and diversity, many companies are focused on race, ethnicity, gender identity, and orientation. What's missing in some cases, and in many cases, are disabilities, those with disabilities, whether it's visible or invisible. And there are certain perceptions and stereotypes that go with that, particularly in an employment or workforce environment. So we want to have that discussion today. It was interesting, I was reading just recently that of those organizations that have an inclusion and diversity program, only 4% actually have a disability inclusion program, which is pretty astounding to me. So today, as we discuss what that really means and how do we, what does it mean for employers? We want to just think about the differing abilities that people bring to the table. And as we talk about this, this is the largest untapped and underserved population and pool of talent that we have in the market. So how do we focus on empowering and employing those individuals to help, as we think about our tech ecosystem just in Atlanta and Georgia, how do we continue to focus on developing that pool of talent, empowering them through the appropriate training and supports and resources, and then employing them? And what does that truly mean? So as we talk about that, I want to introduce Todd just to give us a little bit of background, particularly around the work that BDI does in empowering and employing, because that will then translate into how we demystify many of the myths that exist in the workplace, and then leading into Roger's work with Accenture and just his personal story and what is involved in how individuals with disabilities can make a significant difference in any workplace. So, Todd?
Thanks, Ray. Good afternoon, everyone. So to start out, I just want to provide a kind of a 5-minute or nickel tour of BDI and what we do. BDI is a mid-sized nonprofit, about 400 employees strong. And we're based in Atlanta with roots that really go back to the 60s. We started as a workplace environment, almost it was called a shelter workshop in those days. But BDI really emerged as a workforce resources entity and a workforce innovation leader. And over the years, our work really has evolved, although our mission has stayed the same, which is to help individuals really achieve their potential, whether that means the economic side of things, independence, or inclusion within their communities, or a combination of all those things. But since BDI's inception, we've continuously evolved. So instead of just being a shelter workshop, we began to find partners in the community to make employment placements, and then we became our own community-based employer. And over that time, we also realized that those wraparound services are so incredibly important to those we serve. So in January of 2018, BDI actually merged with the organization with which that it was started under. So it merged with All About Developmental Disabilities. And now there's an unfragmented path for an individual in terms of their roadmap that involves supports and services. So not only the one-stop shop for guidance and supports, but also for opportunities. And those opportunities may include employment, being connected with the benefits that they are entitled to. And that support really runs the gamut in terms of the all ages stages, but we categorize our work under two different umbrellas. One is empowers and one is employs. You can read on the screen exactly what that means, but we provide a number of different programs under both. So under the empowerment programs, I'd mentioned workforce resources, but also those family support programs, because we recognize that it really takes the village, but it's important that we have support going for the entire family where it's needed. And then when we talk about benefits navigation, that is connecting people to benefits, such things as comp or now waivers at the state level, ensuring that individuals receive Social Security assistance. And a lot of those things, while they're available, take some navigating to get through the application process to ensure that there are no kickbacks in terms of that application, and that there are no hearings, that somebody can have a smooth transition. And then on the employment programs, we really focus on 4 core areas, but BDI has a call center in College Park and also runs call centers in different sites in 4 different states. So we have 42 work sites in all, but those also include some administrative services that we provide, facilities management, and then supply chain and logistics. So we placed in a number of different industries. And because of that, we've been able to make a tremendous impact in the community. Since our inception, over 6,000 individuals have been placed into jobs. And on an annual basis, over 80% of those individuals are in those jobs for at least 90 days. And we have a 50% retention after 5 years. And some of these areas, as you probably know, are very high transition, low retention. So we're very proud of that track record overall. And then on the benefits navigation side, just to name another program where we've made an impact. We've connected over 1,200 people with benefits, and the cumulative potential amount of that comes to over $100 million that individuals could receive over their lifetimes. So a lot of impact. But as Ray mentioned, we are talking today about diversity and inclusion. So we will move forward.
Right. And as we think about empowers and employs, and we look at the empowers component, and this is for any organization, it's really about providing the resources, the support, the training and education that's necessary, the skill sets necessary to ensure that an individual with differing abilities can gain meaningful employment and have economic self-sufficiency and independence. And then the next part is really partnering with employers to ensure they have the employment opportunity and sustainable employment through additional supports and services. But there are a lot of perceptions and stereotypes associated with those with individuals, whether it's because not all disabilities are visible. Many of which are invisible. So you can't necessarily look at an individual and know that they may have a disability or not. But they all come with different, skill sets and abilities. So we always like to say differing abilities, but everyone we believe has been blessed with significant abilities. It's just a matter of providing the supports and resources. But as an employer, we often have conversations about just creating greater awareness and understanding, because there are a number of myths or perceptions or stereotypes. Some of these are here. So will it have a negative impact on productivity, or are the accommodations costly? The answers to those are quite the opposite. And in fact, when we look at employees and absenteeism, what we find is that it's actually significantly opposite of that. We actually, one of our employees, Kylie Moore, is 4 years without an absence. She's wheelchair bound. She's got several challenges, but she hasn't missed a day in 4 years. So reliability, on time, consistent performance, and as we talk to employers, we often find that there's really no difference in just creating significant culture and morale and just positivity in the workplace. And so there are some other myths in that Todd will just kind of walk us through before we chat with Roger.
Yeah, so we wanted to play a little bit of two truths and a lie, if you recall that game. And so we wanted to share this with you to see if you could pick out the truths from the fiction. So take a look at these three bullets, and
feel free to chat if you want to have, if you've got an answer.
That's right. You can put in which one you think it is, and then don't worry, we will show you. But yeah, just throw it in the chat. Which one is the work of fiction? All right, and we will move on here for sake of time. All right, so Ray pointed out to that one in what he said earlier, but there is not a higher absentee rate for those hired who live with a disability. All right, we've got two more. You separate the fiction from the truth here. Just throw it into the chat. So the actual percentage is less than 50% in terms of those that may need special accommodations. And, somebody brought this up to me a while back. That really with COVID, we've all needed accommodations. So it's really leveled out things, and that just about all of us had to go remote, and maybe there was some kind of increased technology, getting used to the video conferencing. Maybe your company had to go ahead and get a subscription to one or two or three of those. I think we've jumped between 4 different platforms in any day. But the cost of those special accommodations are also very low. For the most part, they end up being under $500. So you can see there isn't large cost.
Right. And Todd, even when we work with individuals, we can identify if there are special accommodations, and we've got resources that can work to help engineer. We actually work with one of the largest employers of individuals with disabilities, an organization called Source America that actually has an engineering team that can support any efforts. But also, Todd, as we think about it, now that we're in this truly hybrid model, it even more significantly lessens any special accommodations that might be needed.
Absolutely. Good point, Ray. So we have one more set of truths and fiction here. All right. And hopefully you've had a chance to read them all, taking a guess either mentally or through the chat, but it is number 1. And to add a point to this, really those that are living with disabilities, they know that not everybody knows the language or are going to get everything right. It's important to ask questions. It's important to be humble around your colleagues, and that honest candor, that can also be a great opportunity for team building and really to get to know your fellow staff members.
I would just, Roger, if you wanted to just comment on this as well, as you have lived with a disability and have thrived in your workforce, and particularly with Accenture.
Well, I'd like to talk about the invisible disabilities, because I've been able to keep my disabilities to myself, basically, and I only reveal them to who I see appropriate. But it's really a struggle for a person that's trying to manage through this thing called employment. So let me just break down the 4 areas that I see. I see employment is the actual act of getting the job, and there are so many mental challenges that a person has to go through to even make themselves qualified to get a job. Many of the disabled workers or disabled candidates that I even know personally say that they are scared of applying for the job. And that's why you see so many, there are so many of them not employed or not, vying for employment. And the ratio, it's so obscure with how many employed disabled workers there are versus able-bodied workers. So and the enablement, that's getting the tools that they need, and awareness, which is engagement. That's where I live. That's where I had decided to put my foot down, and I really help in getting the word out to mostly the people that have been either affected directly by a disability, either somebody who, in my case, we call them a survivor, because that's applicable to some people who have been through traumatic experience. They are a survivor. And so another class of person that we like to consider is the caregiver. The caregiver has different needs than the survivor. The caregiver is more concerned with, okay, what do I have to do to make this next person's life as close to normal as I can, but I have to maintain my career. I have to maintain my responsibilities. I have to maintain so much more, trying to take care of this, your child or your loved one or your, whoever. they have certain needs. And then I've separated the other two areas, the clinicians and the allies. Clinicians and allies are basically the same thing, but allies are people who want to help, and they just say, "Hey, I want to help. I want to." I've been close to a situation where a disabled person, or I know of a disabled person in my not my immediate family, but in my remote family that I want to help. And the clinicians are the doctors, the lawyers, the people that have dedicated their careers to serving disabled people. And that's how I tend to look at things. So that's how I tend to coordinate things in my mind as far as what I have to deal with. But one thing I want to say, the very first thing that I had to deal with when I decided to come back after a traumatic injury, I had to take some time off. I had to come back and go back into the workforce. And, you have to fill out all of these forms to actually get to the very first stage. And the very first thing they ask you to fill out a voluntary self-identification of disability. I have no idea what that means. And if you read the paper, you read it over and over, you can kind of understand why they're collecting this information, but you really don't truly know. So I had thoughts of, will this impact me later on? Will this impact me? Will this have some measurement to my advancement? Will it class me? Will it, So it took me days to getting over that form, voluntary self-identification of disability, and that's on every standard application that you see today.
And you've done quite a bit of work with HR, correct, at Accenture to kind of work through those types of.
Yes. And I would really like to see HR, and it is becoming a very open, what should I say, department, or the open place within a company to come to. But back in the day when I was first employed, HR always seemed like this force between. Because think about it, you only go to HR when you have situations or problems or family issues or all these kind of things that so it's often built up as a adversarial relationship. But I want to make the relationship more inclusive, more friendly, more something where somebody like me can be represented on the HR board to help them to see that even though their first line of defense is to protect the company and to protect the interests of the employer, they should also have an interest to protect the nature of the employee too, because being disabled is a lot more emotional, a lot more. It's a lot more than your physical disabilities. It's the internal or the hidden disabilities that you can't voice or hide, or sometimes you can't even detect them during the normal HR process to get employed.
So as you think about, I was just thinking about your experience with Accenture and the work that you've done. You helped advocate and start this disability employee resource group. Was that through support of HR and executive sponsorship? How did that come to be? And then, how do we translate that? Because not everyone's an Accenture. How do we begin to translate that into the rest of the tech and business community?
Well, employee resource group is an excellent place to find help with an area that you're struggling with, or find an area where. So somebody told me today, how do I be more inclusive? How do I know if I am being included in my company's. So it was an employee came to me. He said that he is the only person that looks like him on the team, and I said, "Well, does that mean your team is inclusive? Does that mean?" And he said, "Well, yes and no. His part of his experience is not only contributing where he can in a unique way, but also finding people that he can glean with where he feels that they represent him and they mostly assimilate like him. And it's usually around these social issues. It's usually around I belong to the disability ERG at Accenture. And so I have established, we're going to establish next year that for caregivers, because we noticed that a large part of the employees are caregivers to other disabled people, because it's very hard to get a person to identify with the disabled community because of the fear or because of retribution or any of those reasons. But but we are going to establish a caregiver support group internal to Accenture. But I have an external survivor support group, which is going quite well, actually.
And so, and thank you. So, as I think about your lessons learned within the Accenture world, how do we translate that to other organizations as we begin to think about expanding diversity and inclusion and really making it inclusive of those with differing abilities, whether physical, intellectual, cognitive, etc. What are some of the, because you had mentioned when we talked earlier about some of the positive work that Accenture's done to become more inclusive across the spectrum, if you will. What are your thoughts? How do we begin to translate that and support other organizations? Lessons learned.
Well, it's kind of like everybody has to do their part. I love Accenture and what they have put together in terms of their hiring practices. They're more aware if they know about it, if they know that they're hiring a disabled person, because in some cases they don't know that they're hiring a disabled person. Right. But the areas that we need to work on is those retention rates and long-term performance management of that community of people, and advancement of those the people in that community, because that's really, you can hurt a lot of people to get hired, but it's to keep them here for the long haul and having a system in place for them to feel like, okay, my work is valuable, my work is useful, my work is leading to advancement. And that's the next hurdle that we need to climb, is to get that advancement hurdle figured out, because we definitely need to do some work in that area.
That's a great point, because it is one thing for us to be able to empower individuals and get them employed. It's another thing for us to then get them fully immersed into and kind of enculturated into the organization so that they can thrive and have long-term meaningful employment and advancement if they choose to have that advancement. It's a great point. I think about the great work that's been done by a number of companies, but it seems still to be fragmented. And one of the things that we've talked about is how do we bring, particularly in Metro Atlanta, the tech community together to begin to leverage the skill sets that we see and are working with in individuals. We launched a program with another organization in South Florida around software quality assurance and user acceptance testing and certification. and are now looking at technician, Cisco-based technician level 1 training in cybersecurity, because we know that there are significant opportunities for individuals to thrive in that space. Mm-hmm. But it's about how do we bring that, I think, to your point earlier about bringing the community together and working together for that advancement and employment. And it may start with just understanding and awareness through, perhaps even just disability awareness training in an organization, so that all employees, teammates, co-workers feel comfortable and aren't guarded in their conversations and can address that.
Yeah, that's right, Ray. And today, having had the opportunity to sit in on a couple of the other sessions for Converge, the word mentoring has come up more often than not. And that's probably a big part of that advancement piece, having that ongoing mentorship and somebody who can help provide some additional support as far as that next level. I put this slide up, and I think most of the graphics here are pretty self-explanatory as far as the benefits. And I know Roger, Ray, you've touched on several of them, but the one to the bottom left corner there, we're all dealing with an aging workforce, and the fact is that many of us, BDI included, have staff vacancies that we're trying to fill, and this is opening up to the widest pool of candidates possible can help with that. So it's a benefit to employing those with disabilities. So I think the rest of them are pretty self-explanatory. The team dynamic and involving other perspectives, and then the incentives that are available for companies themselves.
Thank you, Todd. Roger, as we're approaching our time now, we'll open it up for some questions. But Roger, any just final thoughts on as we move forward, particularly as we think about the technology sector in Metro Atlanta and Georgia, and we think about the growth that we see. Any final thoughts around what employers should be thinking about, how we capitalize on this incredible, pool of talent?
I heard a lot of great things today by some great leaders in our community, and they're building some excellent structures for disabled and workers for workers of color, in matter of fact. And but we can't just think that this is an HR problem. We can't just look at it as okay, we get them in the door. How do we keep them in the door? The issue starts way before that. It's spreading the awareness not only to people who don't have a disability, but to people who have a disability, because I had to be retrained in my thinking that I was in fact disabled. And, just going through that mental gymnastics of, should I fill in this box on this form that says I'm disabled? Will it afford me any positive repercussions from it, or any negative repercussions from it? And going to the disabled community and educating folks is really where I love to be, and that's where I'm spending most of my time. Is I love these. I saw this a coffee shop that was primarily 100% run by disabled community, and it was so beautiful to see, because it was telling me, yes, they can do work, but they just might be able to do a different type of work depending on how bad or serious that case was. But at the corporate level, in who is doing that review of, hey, if you're you've had this kind of problem in your past, or You can come work for us. You can, and it doesn't have to be said, but it takes an education on the HR part and on the candidate's part.
Right.
Because we're very much, when you go to an HR interview, the very first thing in your mind, you're thinking, okay, what shouldn't I say that will get me thrown off the list or moved over to the side, or anything negative. But we should have an open dialogue with our HR folks in the future, I'm saying, that would enable us to select the right talent that we need to fulfill the job requirements.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree 100%. And it's, we all have been blessed with different abilities. And then, organizations like ours and others in this particularly Metro Atlanta can help work with functional leaders and HR leaders to really provide awareness, and then also work with those that we serve to help them through this whole process. So we are really at the end of our time. Roger, I want to thank you very much for your time today. Jerry and Todd, thank you as well. We do have a couple of minutes if there's any question, via chat. I think we've got about 2 or 3 minutes left, so I'll just pause there. Doesn't look like we have anything, and we are approaching the end. So we just want to, again, thank you all for being here and joining us. And also thank you to the Technology Association of Georgia for providing us the opportunity to spread awareness and really talk about inclusion and diversity